I'm Aaron Burnett. Out front tonight, we have breaking news on the Los Angeles manhunt that ended with a body dead inside a mountain cabin. Now, in just a couple of moments, we could learn if the fugitive ex-cop Christopher Dorner was the man found in the cabin last night. Authorities have been working to identify the charred remains, and police say they have reason to believe it is Dorner. Now, Dorner had been on the run since last week. He had targeted his former fellow officers with the Los Angeles Police Department. He is now accused of killing 4 people, including 2 officers. There are a lot of questions tonight for the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office, which led the operations in those final hours of the manhunt last night. One of the most important questions: did police set the cabin ablaze? Our Miguel Marquez is out front in San Bernardino, California. Miguel, I know you are aware the press conference will be beginning any moment, and I know we're going to go to that the second we have it. We'll have it for our viewers here live. But what are you expecting them to answer?
Sheriff will be responding in about 2 minutes.
Well, I can tell you right off the bat that we've just heard there's a 2-minute call to this press conference, so that will be starting in just a couple of minutes now. We are hoping to learn, one, if the body that was discovered in that cabin up in the mountains here in San Bernardino was, in fact, Christopher Dorner. Every indication and every source that we have says that it was. There's local press reporting that his wallet was also found in that cabin, so we expect that that may come tonight. It may not be a full confirmation, but they may have dental records. The family may have been able to identify him. There may be tattoos, scars, and the like they can do. They are talking about doing something even more intense, like genetic testing, to make sure that it is him. But I can tell you that the search for Mr. Dorner on that hill has certainly stopped. So we have a very good sense that he has been found. Other questions, as you mentioned, Aaron, coming in, is how that cabin actually caught fire and who was responsible for that.
And let me ask you that question, because obviously a lot of people are wondering, did they have the ability to take him alive and not do it? Were there perhaps any choices made or mistakes made that led to him being killed? I mean, is that something you think we're going to get some specific answers on?
We expect to, certainly, and we hope to. We don't know that we will. There's a slew of enforcement agents that will be here. Everybody from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office to the LAPD chief, the Irvine chief, the Riverside chief. So we hope to get a lot of those basic questions answered as to what happened in that cabin and how it happened that this fire took off. As you guys know, Mr. Dorner, after a long, seemingly Mr. Dorner, after a very long chase yesterday afternoon, ended up in a cabin. It was surrounded by police. It wasn't clear to me whether or not it was SWAT team or not, but a fire did ensue. There was recording that indicated that they wanted to bring in the burners and possibly burn it down. That is not typical SWAT tactics, and so there are lots of questions about how that happened. I also understand that that Mr. Dorner's cell phone went on shortly after he was known again to be out and about, and there may have been some communication with him. We hope to ask that as well, as to whether or not there was any communication with Mr. Dorner. Did he give any indication that he wanted to give himself up, or did this just turn into after another deputy was shot and killed, did this just turn into a situation where deputies were going in to get him?
Right. I mean, going in together. I mean, you said it very well there. I want to ask you a question about the fire, because, Miguel, I know you've been doing a lot of work on what happened with that fire. From our reporting here at CNN, of course, there was no attempt to put that fire out at first. Is that standard operating procedure, or do you think that the hesitancy on that, or the delay, could lead to a conclusion in terms of their intent on, again, dead or alive?
What we understand, they went in with very heavy equipment to tear down the walls, to introduce gas into that structure. There were explosions that occurred, ammunition going off. They did hear one shot, a single shot, or what sounded like a single shot in that structure as well. There was concern for the safety of firefighters going in there. In the event somebody survived, it did sound for some time as though Mr. Dorner could have escaped into the woods. Sheriff's Department saying that they didn't have the entire house surrounded. They did have helicopters overhead. So there was a lot of confusion clearly in their operation as well, and we hope to hear today from the sheriff himself on how everything played out in literally a minute-by-minute fashion, because it is not typical for deputies to burn down a house essentially in order to get somebody out. Aaron.
All right. I mean, we're obviously waiting for this press conference to begin any moment. Let me bring in William Bratton here, of course, former chair of the LAPD. Let me ask you, what do you think about this issue? Obviously, it's very difficult in the heat of the moment. You're trying to get somebody. But from what you understand of all the details of what actually happened last night, do you think every possible effort was made to recover him alive or not?
I can't even speak to that. There are too many unanswered questions, as you've already referenced. And hopefully in this press conference they will explain what happened last evening.
All right, and the press conference is beginning, so let's go now and listen to the San Bernardino Police Chief's office. We're expecting Lieutenant Anthony Onodera to call the presser to order, and after that, speaking on behalf of the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office will be Sheriff John McMahon, as well as the Deputy Chief Paul Cook and Captain Kevin Lacey.
Good afternoon, and thank you for
let's
coming
listen
to
in.
our 4 o'clock briefing. Before we get started, I'd like to make some brief introductions. With us today is Sheriff John McMahon from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, Chief Sergio Diaz from the Riverside Police Department, Chief David Magard, Irvine Police Department, Chief Charlie Beck, Los Angeles Police Department, U.S. Marshal Dave Singer from the U.S. Marshals, Special Agent in Charge Tim Delaney from the Federal Bureau of Investigations, Assistant Chief Dan Sforza, State of California Department of Fish and Game, and Chief Bill Siegel, California Highway Patrol. If you have any questions regarding individual or specific questions about their individual investigations, please hold those until the question and answer period. And with that, I introduce Sheriff John McMahon.
Good afternoon. The events that occurred yesterday in the Big Bear area brought to close an extensive manhunt for murder suspect Christopher Dorner. Our deputies in Big Bear responded to the report of a stolen vehicle with a subject matching the description of Dorner. It was later discovered that he crashed that vehicle and carjacked a vehicle in the Angeles Oaks area. The deputies continued searching that area for the new suspect vehicle, the white pickup truck, as well as Dorner. The deputies were able to locate the vehicle, crashed, and Dorner fled into a vacant cabin. As the deputies were arriving, we believe suspect Dorner began firing and ambushed our deputy sheriffs that were responding. 2 of our deputy sheriffs were struck by gunfire, one of which was severely injured. Deputy Alex Collins, he's currently at the hospital being treated. He went through a couple of different surgeries. I just spoke to his wife. He's in good spirits and should make a full recovery after a number of additional surgeries. Unfortunately, our other deputy, Detective Jeremiah McKay, was pronounced deceased at 2:24 p.m. yesterday at the hospital. Detective McKay is 35 years old and has been a member of our department for 15 years. He's married and has 2 children, a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-month-old son. He's presently assigned to the Yucaipa station, but had also been a detective at the Big Bear station. My sincere condolences go out to the McKay family. This is truly another sad day for law enforcement. Our department is grieving from this event. It's just a terrible deal for all of us. The folks that are up here with me as well have also been dealing with this suspect's behavior over the last week. We believe that this investigation is over at this point, and we'll just need to move on from here. I will tell you that the deputy sheriffs that responded to this active shooting scene yesterday are absolutely true heroes. There were rounds being fired, as you saw in some of the news coverage. It was absolutely incredible. It was like a war zone. And our deputies continued to go in to that area and try to neutralize and stop the threat. The rounds kept coming, but the deputies didn't give up. Our deputy sheriffs are some true heroes. They're highly trained, and I will tell you that I'm proud to be a member of this department, and our deputy sheriffs did a great job yesterday. Thank you.
Any questions?
Are we going to take questions now, Chief?
Yes.
Can you confirm, obviously, the question of the moment, can you confirm that it is Mr. Dorner, his remains, that was found in that cabin last night?
I cannot absolutely positively confirm it's him. The suspect that we were following and also had stolen the vehicle matched his description. His behavior, based on our deputies' interaction with him inside the vacant cabin, was consistent with Mr. Dorner's activity prior to, and we're not currently involved in a manhunt any longer. Our coroner's division is working on trying to confirm the identity through forensics, and we should know that at some point here soon.
Sheriff, there are lots of questions about how the fire started at the cabin, whether that was on purpose by the Sheriff's Department to set it ablaze, that was something that happened as a result of the tear gas that was fired in there. Can you explain how that transpired, what happened?
I can tell you that it was not on purpose. We did not intentionally burn down that cabin to get Mr. Dorner out. The tear gas canisters that we used, first off, we used a presence when we showed up. Secondly, we used a cold tear gas. Then we used, the next tear gas was that was pyrotechnic. Does generate a lot of heat. We introduced those canisters into the residence, and a fire erupted.
There was some chatter that was caught, I guess, on scanners and everything about a burner, and I don't know what that is. Can you explain what a burner is?
The pyrotechnic type canisters are commonly referred to as burners.
Sure. Have you ever been there the entire time during this manhunt, that close to your command post, and was this particular cabin searched for the extensive search that your deputies and law enforcement were conducting for the past several days?
I'm going to ask Deputy Chief Kovinski, who was heading up the door-to-door search in Big Bear, to answer that question for you.
Good afternoon. During the initial phases of this investigation on Thursday, after his vehicle was found, Dorner's vehicle was found, we did an extensive search of that area. About 80% of the cabins in that area are part-time cabins. We went to each cabin. If there were no signs of break-in or no open doors, we then noted it and moved on to the next cabin. Any other questions?
Do you know if any of your deputies knocked on the door of that cabin or attempted to contact the residents inside?
All those cabins in that particular area, we sent teams of deputies out to check to see if there was any entry and if we could make contact.
Is there anything you can tell us about what happened that morning? There's lots of questions about whether he was in that condo for days, hours. If you know that, number one. And what happened to the people that were in there before he stole the first call?
I don't believe that there were anybody in there on Thursday. At the start of the investigation, we don't believe that there was anybody in that cabin. That is somebody that either a rental or the owner.
Was there any, did you guys find weapons in either the burned out cabin or the one that he had been staying in? Any sort of personal belongings that have linked Mr. Dorner? Can you talk about that?
You know what, some of these things are still preliminary, and as the investigation moves forward, we'll have more information regarding those things.
Were belongings found, though, in that cabin with him?
As I said, some of that information will become available at the conclusion of the investigation. We're still...
In the cabin on Thursday, what do you think he made entry into the cabin?
I would imagine that it could have been Thursday, but I'm telling you, at the time there was nobody renting that cabin.
Did you tell individuals?
We did not find any forced entry.
Do you believe that he picked that cabin because it was close to where the station was, to where the press conferences were happening? Do you believe he was planning another attack, or the shootout just happened because he got scared?
You know, at this point, that would be speculative, and we'll comment on that later as the investigation
unfolds. We spoke to individuals in that neighborhood who said that no one ever knocked on their doors. People who live there. That cabin was a vacation rental. The people who were cleaning it to rent it out this weekend just surprised Mr. Dorner there. It doesn't sound like you guys were there, and completely cleared that area.
I can tell you that the cabin in question had not been rented out since February 6th. And as I said, there was an extensive search in that area of the cabins. Okay, thank you.
Please understand that there is an ongoing investigation, and many of your questions will be answered at a later date. We're not going to be taking any further questions at this point. Please understand that the PIOs will be summarizing statements made by this department during this press conference, and we'll be posting an update to the department website, as well as sending updates via email. I'd like to thank you all for coming to our press conference. Thank you once again. That concludes the press conference for today.
All right, and of course, that's the end of the press conference from the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office. As you could tell, the press had a lot more questions they wanted. A couple of the headlines here. Miguel Marquez just asked a question there at the end, but you heard them talk about the fact that they are not, at least in their words, can't absolutely confirm that the body in the cabin that was found was that of Christopher Dorner. Let me bring in Miguel now, who is in the room with the press conference. Miguel, obviously we didn't get a lot of answers. Let's put it that way.
A shockingly short press conference for as many questions that there are hanging out there. Clearly a sensitive point for the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office about how those cabins were searched. Literally, what is most shocking about this, perhaps, is that Mr. Dorner's truck broke down on a forest road between the two ski valleys here. The cabin where these cleaners, these individuals who own this apartment were going to clean it, where that was less than a mile away. It was also across the street from the communications center and the command center that the sheriffs set up here. We spoke to people in that area who said that no one ever knocked on their door, no one ever asked if they saw anything strange, no one ever came around. The owners who own that cabin apparently own several different cabins throughout the area. They rent them out for summer rentals. Why didn't police tell or sheriff's department tell individuals, make sure your empty cabins, your summer rentals are secure? None of that seemed to have happened, and the guy was hiding literally right under their noses. Shocking.
And what's your feeling in terms of when we're going to get answers, Miguel, particularly on this issue of an absolute confirmation on the body? That was something that we all anticipated would be done by now. I mean, obviously they say there's no active manhunt, but why no absolute confirmation?
We would certainly expect that. I mean, there's no active manhunt. They seem to clearly have indication that it is him, very strong indication it is him. Whether or not it's the family telling them that it's him, or it is scars, tattoos, dental records. Perhaps they want to make that. Perhaps they want to make that genetic link before that they go and tell us with 110% certainty that it's him. It's not very clear. He did seem to indicate that they are going to know very, very soon, so perhaps they have dental records on the way and they can make that indication very clear so that people can sort of rest easy. But at the same time, they say we're almost sure it's him and there is no more search for him, so that kind of answers your question.
Right. I mean, certainly in every way that would seem to make sense. Thanks very much to you, Miguel, there at the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office press conference. Let's go back now to Commissioner Bratton, of course, former chief of the Los Angeles Police Department, and he was, of course, chief during 3 years that Christopher Dorner was on the force. Good to see you. So let me you just heard the press conference. Obviously, they weren't able to answer a lot of questions that the media has, that the country has. But this is the fundamental question. And I know it's hard because you weren't there, but do you think it was possible to capture Christopher Dorner alive?
I'm not going to speak to that because I don't have enough details. That press conference was very unusual in terms of the minimal amount of information that was given out, considering the large number of questions that are out there. So it's quite obvious over the next several days there's going to be a lot of intense media focus on that department, on this issue. and answers are going to have to be provided at some point in time. That these investigations are very complicated because there's so many moving parts, and having headed up a number of them over the years, that I'm well aware of the complexity, but there are some answers that are going to have to be forthcoming. Otherwise, the drumbeat of media pressure, public pressure, is going to become very overwhelming directly at this department.
And one thing that there was there's some questions about and not really answers about was how much negotiations there were. As you know, Miguel was reporting that there perhaps might have been cell phone conversations between Dorner and police deputies, although obviously they didn't confirm that tonight. I wanted to play an exchange, though, over the radio that was between the police and get your reaction to it. Here it is.
I hear some screaming.
That actually wasn't the one I was looking for. Can we get the one with the back and forth? We have it here. Okay.
Control 61 Lincoln, sound like one shot fired from inside the residence.
Copy, one shot fired from inside the residence. Confirming you still want fire to roll in?
Roll in and stage.
So how do you interpret that?
Well, the earlier clip you just showed clearly did sound like a war zone.
Right.
Obviously,
which they just described it as a war zone, right?
So I know I was intrigued that last night when I first heard about the one shot that with all that was going on.
Right.
My assumption, and it would be an assumption that because there is really not much clarity to this situation at the moment, is that possibly after the building caught fire and the shooting had stopped from within the cabin and the sheriff's deputies outside the cabin, that a single shot could have been heard. I also heard a report that you might expect with the intensity of that fire that there was ammunition and explosions going on in the cabin itself.
Right.
Heat gets intense enough, it will set off that ammunition. So
that could have been what you were hearing?
This question, this issue of the single shot, as they move forward with investigation, they're going to have to basically piece this together literally second by second, minute by minute. They have video that will allow them to do some of the time frame development. They have the technical capabilities to pull out sounds, if you will.
Right.
Because the one-shot speculation is that he committed suicide.
Yep.
That's something that hopefully the autopsy may help to at least initially determine how, in fact, did he die? Did he die from the fire, the smoke, or was there a gunshot involved? The intensity of shooting into that building by the police, understandable in terms of the intensity of the shooting coming out at them. It's quite likely he could have been possibly even wounded during that exchange. So really won't know until that autopsy, those autopsy results come back.
Let me bring in Tom Fuentes, former FBI Assistant Director, and Cade Courtley, a former Navy SEAL and sniper, into this conversation. Let me ask you, Tom, what is your view of this single shot theory?
Well, I would agree with Commissioner Bratton that if there's one shot fired, it could be him committing suicide. It doesn't sound like the police would be firing a single shot. If they were responding to fire, there would be more than one shot. So to me, it does sound that that's a good possibility if, in fact, that noise was a gunshot.
And Cade, what's your view when you just heard obviously some of the radio communications in terms of the shots, but also some of the conversations the police were having during the final minutes yesterday? Do you think that questions out there surrounding how the police handled this are justified or not?
Totally unjustified. Number one, I would never discredit anybody who was there because I wasn't there. And number two, for anybody to try and analyze what it's like when there's that volume of fire and you're there and you're receiving fire, to be questioned by anybody who wasn't there, that's unacceptable.
Do you think, though, that because 2 police officers had been killed, that in the minds of the police that were there, that dead or alive meant less? I mean, this is someone who had killed their colleagues.
This person had a manifesto that said he was going to go down in a blaze of glory. Well, be careful what you ask for. This guy had killed 4 people, allegedly, and had basically told everybody he was not going to be taken alive. So if I was on the ground with that information, I would use all the force I had to end that as quickly as possible.
Tom, what's the bottom line? Will we ever really know what happened and when or not?
Well, we might not. I mean, the sheriff's office obviously will be doing an intense internal investigation to reconstruct what happened throughout the events from the time that he fled the road and went to that cabin in particular, and how the tactics worked and what they wanted to do. You know, at the end of the day, in agreeing with your last guest, the subject Dorner did not escape. He didn't kill. Once you had tactical officers on site and the area contained, perimeter established, no other officers were killed. He didn't escape, and it ended. So the fact that there was no additional loss of life except his, which I attribute to him, he caused his own death, that I would agree that that's a successful resolution in that sense.
All right. Well, thanks very much to all three of you. We appreciate it. And still to come, passengers have been trapped for days on that crippled car.